Maniac is a show now on Netflix and stars Emma Stone and Jonah Hill. And this is something I watched this weekend. This is a show that you may have seen trailers of recently, and it's about a man and a woman who meet at this facility where there's a drug test going on. They volunteer as subjects, and once they start to take these drugs, they realize their minds are connected in some very strange ways. They're starting to see visions of each other connected in some form or nature, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. What is the connection that is between these two? This is not the exact plot of the show. I want to actually give the specifics, for you to see for yourself. I want to keep this as non-spoiler as possible. I finished watching the season yesterday, and ever since I finished watching it, I've been thinking about it, thinking about what to say, how to reflect on it. I found this story so fascinating and so thought-provoking, especially the fact that since it's not exactly what you think it is. If you're going in for a big science fiction extravaganza, then you're not exactly going to get that. You're going to get something a little more than that. You're going to actually get a story about the simple, basic humanity, about people trying to exist in the society. And the way it's handled is, along with the fact that there is this science fiction element to it. There is even a computer in this, which is given a human emotional aspect to it, which I thought was a very interesting idea. And that is essentially what we're watching over here. We're seeing human emotions really become the most important part of this entire season. Jonah Hill's character, Owen, suffers from schizophrenia. He was diagnosed 10 years before, and he sees visions of things that he shouldn't see. He sometimes will be going around and he'll see popcorn popping up on the floor, or he'll see visions of his brother maybe, who is very much still alive, but he'll see his brother walk past him, say something. And Emma Stone is a recovering drug addict who can't get enough of this pill that she's been taking from this pharmaceutical company that she is becoming the test subject for, as well as Owen is. They can't seem to take anymore. Owen's looking for a cure, and Annie is looking for a way to just end up getting more money so that she can get more drugs. But at the end of it, this is going to completely change the two of them in crazy ways. And through the spaces of 3 different tests with 3 different pills, one worse than the other one, you're constantly being forced to see all of this happen, along with other characters involved in it, like the scientists, and how they're responding to this and how this experiment is affecting their lives as well. This is directed by Cary Fukunaga, who also did the first season for True Detective. He's a fantastic director, and you can tell that his style, his visual sense, the cinematography, all of it is very much prevalent in this. There's also a fantastic score accompanying this entire season. Jonah Hill and Emma Stone are both phenomenal in this particular season. They're both great. They both have some layers to them, like I've already talked about, that are beautifully explored and beautifully acted upon. The most fascinating of the 2 characters, I would say, is definitely Jonah Hill. He's probably the protagonist of this entire show. And the way he is exploring all of these things that have happened and how he looks at them as options and how they're brought up in his life was one of the most fascinating aspects of the entire season to me. His character was very compelling. I also thought Annie was very compelling because her emotions are not as simple as she's a recovering drug addict. She's a drug addict for a reason. I'm not going to go into that because I feel like that will be a spoiler, but she's also dealing with something very personal. And that factor is also feeding into her life in a very live way, just as Owen's schizophrenia is. And there's also stuff involving his family that is going on, which is also eating away at him. And so the way it's all handled, you think this is actually a very serious show, but there's actually a surprising amount of humor in it as well. This is also a dark comedy. It's got its moments of extreme seriousness and a lot of tension building, but it's also got moments of levity where you laugh a little bit also, and you find some unintentional comedy in places. It's got its elements of being really, really science fiction in its approach and being a bit more futuristic while also being extremely grounded. And I found this to be one of the strengths of the show. That just attributes to good writing. And this is a tough thing to pull off because there are so many different tones being juggled. Oftentimes, when you're juggling so many tones, you can lose sight of what you're doing, which is really well. And somehow, despite all odds, this particular season of Maniac keeps it together in a fantastic way. and I found that enthralling. One of the other things I noticed is that they actually shot this in a lot of different aspect ratios at points. And I found that also interesting. It would start with sometimes like a 1.33 aspect ratio, then move to a widescreen, then to 2.2, and it would keep switching like that. And I thought that was really interesting. It was like seeing IMAX, but IMAX is with the 1.9 and the 2.3. And so that was also a really cool visual thing that I noticed. It's also surprisingly retro. There is a 1980s synth vibe to it, which I found interesting too, like in this futuristic world. And I'm coming to a point where I'm starting to see Justin Theroux in a lot of these things. He was in Mute earlier this year, and now he's here. I just find it fascinating that that's our career trajectory right now. He plays a less crazy version, or maybe more crazy version, of himself in this movie. His introduction is insane, for to say the least. I have no idea. I think if there's a problem that some people will have with this particular season of the show is that it'll take a while for it to really get a sense of what's going on. It takes about 2 episodes to really get to the meat of the entire season. And so sometimes while watching that first episode and watching episode 2, you can feel a little lost. Also, much like a lot of shows and some very important shows that are made which require you to think and to really absorb what's going on, there are a lot of things introduced in those first few episodes, certain elements or certain visual cues that you have to remember, because there's one cue in particular, one very tiny little thing that's brought up in episode 1 that they bring up again much later in the season, and then you remember, oh right, he saw that in episode 1, and this is Owen we're talking about. Same thing with Annie. You have to remember that Annie saw something and was mentioning something, and you have to remember that episodes later that, oh yeah, she talked about that thing. We have to go back to that. And so that is often a fascinating thing, because while I like shows which do that, I like storylines which require you to pay attention. For some people that can be a little too much sometimes. But the one thing I will like to talk about in very minor detail, because I again want to keep your interpretations to you, is that the show constantly asks a question along with Owen's mind, which is how much of this is real and how much of this is not real. Now obviously you'll know which parts are real and which parts are not real, because you know what's the parts which are visions and stuff that is going on in their heads because of the pills, and which part is real. But as the show goes on, and as Owen is also trying to understand which of this is real and which of this is fake, you're actually kind of in the same level with him. What part is real? Is all of this real, or is this all just a simulation? I mean, what's really going on here? I don't know how much to talk about Maniac without having you see the season, because I can actually go on a little more, but I would rather you actually see for yourself what this season has to offer and what it does so well than me having to tell you. This is actually one of my favorite shows in a very long time. I don't actually have a major issue with this entire season. I didn't dislike a single thing in it. And that's a hard thing to do. So yeah, I'm gonna give Maniac Season 1 an A+. I'm really thinking if I can find any flaw, but really I couldn't. I guess sometimes it gets a little slow, but then that's fine. I mean, True Detective Season 1 was a bit slow, and I love True Detective Season 1. That is an A+ for me. So really, I'm not gonna complain too much. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've seen Maniac, what did you think about it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, let me know. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. I'll see you guys at the movies.